Nobody can do this as well as I can. No, 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 that's not what I'm saying. Well, then let the other people do it for whatever. And I'm not talking about selfish, power hungry leadership, but rather the quiet, unintentional ways we do this. Most people, ask yourself, if you were convinced that being direct, straightforward, and talking about things in the open was the best thing to do for the organization, if you were convinced of that, why wouldn't you do it? Well, you're not protecting the efficiency of the organization. What you're doing is you're protecting your control of the situation. Culture can overpower it a little bit. Actually, culture can overpower it a lot. But first thing is, number one is to recognize excellence. And people know. They know who really did the work. And you can never get in the way of that praise getting down to people that actually did the work. The way leaders get themselves into trouble here is they tell themselves that people can't be trusted to do certain things, but really that's anxiety on your part. But when you get into a combat environment, and when I say combat environment for you, that is like the core essence of what your business or your company is built to do. You have to rely on everybody to do their part in the fight. Yeah. But the thing about people pleasers is they underestimate the leaders that they think they're pleasing. You know, like a savvy executive is going to look at a mid-level manager and say, they'll have an idea of how much you and your team can get accomplished. If it's not achievable, or if it's so aggressive that it's really impractical, you start missing deadlines, the quality suffers. People doing the work actually start feeling bad about the job that they're doing, and then the whole thing starts to unravel. So but this is when we tell ourselves, well, it's just faster if I do it. Or something like, you know, they're new, they're not ready for that. Nope, that's your ego talking. You think that by being stoic or straight-faced or not showing emotion that people won't judge you as much, that you're coming off as stronger. Pay attention to situations that make you uncomfortable, make you anxious. Think about why you feel that way. Hi, I'm Mike Targus, retired Marine, founder of Center Desk Leadership Coaching. How we put our needs before the needs of others without even realizing it. You're a good leader. You care about people. You work hard. You want to see them do well. But without realizing it, you put your needs ahead of theirs. How does this happen? It's not a comfortable thing to think about. And I'm not talking about selfish, power-hungry leadership, but rather the quiet, unintentional ways we do this, the decisions we make, our subconscious beliefs, and how they impact what we do and how we interact with our team. Number one, avoiding difficult conversations. We can all probably admit that we avoid at least some confrontations that we ought not to. And when we dodge conflict or avoid that confrontation, we're not protecting the group. We're protecting ourselves. We're avoiding the discomfort that comes along with being the bad guy. And we're avoiding that emotional hit that comes when we see that we've upset somebody. But we'd be better off focusing on making them better by being straightforward, open, and honest. For me, early on in my career, when I was a lieutenant, I remember one guy in particular, pretty good guy, but I remember being in the field one night, totally dark, and I remember the way he interacted with the squad I was co-located with, and it was very atypical or very different than how he had been behaving before. And I'm sitting there in the dark, and the rest of the squad knew I was there. He didn't know I was there, and he's kind of acting like an ass in front of everybody. Not about me or anything and like that, but I know that the rest of the squad was like wondering what I was going to do about it. And I didn't do anything. I just kind of sat there in the dark with everybody. And I think I sacrificed a lot of respect from the squad, from the rest of my platoon. I'm sure the word got out about that. And you have stories we all have stories like that. So not confronting the situation cost me some credibility with the team. And a lot of times when we're in situations like that, we tell ourselves that maybe we're misreading the situation or overreacting, or maybe this person just needs a break. But the best thing you can do is trust your gut, trust that subconscious that's telling you to take action. Now, for me, early on in my career, I didn't have anybody to really talk about that situation. How do you deal with that? Like a practical example. So that's something that you can help somebody with if you've been down that road, or if you got a coach or a mentor, that's something that they can do for you as well. What's the psychology behind it? Conflict avoidance, it's self-preservation. We are looking out for ourselves before the welfare of the team or what's good for the team, which in that example would have been to maybe take some action or at least say something. And while these conversations are difficult, by the way, read the book Crucial Conversations for some help on this. But if these are difficult for you, which they are for most people, ask yourself if you were convinced that being direct, straightforward, and talking about things in the open was the best thing to do for the organization. If you were convinced of that, why wouldn't you do it? So we have to reflect on it and ask ourselves why we don't take action in those situations all the time. And the goal is to do it more and more over time. The next one is hoarding information or keeping information to yourself. Let's talk about that. Have you ever told yourself that these guys, they don't need to know that right now? Or maybe you hold off on telling people things because maybe they ask too many questions, it'll take too long. Well, you're not protecting the efficiency of the organization. What you're doing is you're protecting your control of the situation. And a pretty common underlying fear that people have in that situation is if everybody knows this, then I'm going to be less essential. And it might not be something, it probably isn't something that you think out loud to yourself, but that's what's going on. This is a form of status preservation. You're the boss, you know more than others. When in reality, the most effective way to lead a team and to manage results is that to share that information, make sure everybody has enough, as much information as possible to do their job well. And ask yourself if you're being told to lead that way. Is your boss saying not to share information with other people? Probably not. You're the one saying that. So you got to ask yourself why. What does sharing information do in the first place? Sharing information brings people together. They can collaborate, they can talk about things, they can learn from each other. They're engaged. But depending on your view of success, deep down, what you really believe, if it's about you, you really may not want that. It's taken attention and credit away from you, possibly, which is pretty scary, especially if you don't even realize that you're doing it, which I think a lot of people don't. You see this in the Marine Corps, military, probably as a whole. It's just people, but people can be super competitive. And while you would think that in that environment, guys would see the performance of their unit or their organization as the reflection of themselves and their leadership, a lot of them do, but not everybody does. The Marine Corps has the same kind of dynamics in a lot of ways that your organization have. You have promotions, you have ranks or titles, you have specially selected promotions, that kind of thing. And it's just people in the organization anyway. So they're going to react to those kind of dynamics similarly. Culture can overpower it a little bit. Actually, culture can overpower it a lot, but nobody's perfect. I came across a really great article when I was preparing this video by an author by the name of Paul Zak. He's a neuroeconomist. He's got a PhD in economics from UPenn. He's done a lot of research on what builds trust. Specifically, the way he did this is he has found a way to measure oxytocin levels in people's bloodstream. And what he found was that the higher the oxytocin, the more inclined people were to have a positive outlook on their work environment, to trust each other, to work better together. And that's caused by oxytocin. So he determined that there is 8 ways that oxytocin levels rise. There's probably more than 8 ways, but as pertains to the work environment. This is from HBR 2017, January, February issue, by the way. First thing is, number one is to recognize excellence, and not only to recognize it, but you got to do it as soon as possible in relation to the event occurring. So if somebody does something well, you got to recognize them ASAP in front of their peers, obviously, but at the very least, you got to recognize them as soon as possible after they do it. And you might think, well, I work hard too. What's the big deal? And the big deal is just how people feel about it. And the other thing is, the higher you go, the more senior you get, more promotions, you go from manager, director, vice president, the less that you can accept this kind of praise in front of a group. So maybe when you're a frontline manager, you know that's okay to have a little bit of that. But the higher you go, it just doesn't look good. People don't know the full story, and they want to tell a story to themselves, make themselves feel a little bit better about situations, which may or may not be true, and probably is not true. And getting back to the "you can't fool the troops" quote or expression that I mentioned earlier, it's best to assume that people know. They know who really did the work, and you can never get in the way of that praise getting down to people that actually did the work. And in the Marines is actually pretty good at this. This is something that I think there's some things in the civilian world I think are better, and then some things in the Marines I think are a little bit better. The Marine Corps culture is pretty anti-individual. In fact, that's the whole purpose of boot camp, Everybody gets their head shaved. They get a uniform. They get a one look uniform, and all the same equipment, all the same everything. And there is a culture of it not being cool to take credit for things. You can go overboard on that, but I think generally it's pretty good, especially for leaders. In the psychology behind this one, self enhancement bias. We need to feel appreciated and recognized deep down. And when I say deep down, I'm talking about maybe the subconscious. Subconscious is really what you truly believe. It's not necessarily what you say, it's not necessarily even how you consciously act, but your subconscious is going to show through in situations like that. And if you really believe that you deserve more credit than other people, then it's going to show through. So you got to be on the watch for that. Number 4, everybody's favorite, micromanaging. My definition of micromanagement: getting too involved in how things are done instead of focusing on what needs to be done and leaving the details to the executor. The way leaders get themselves into trouble here is they tell themselves that people can't be trusted to do certain things, but really that's anxiety on your part as the leader. It probably has very little to do with your people. You want it done right. You want it done now. You don't want to be embarrassed. You get too involved and try to control too many details. And you're telling yourself this is the way to success. But what you're really doing is you're managing your own fear, your fear of failure. It's not about other people. It's about you. In the Marine Corps, it can be really easy to micromanage Marines, and a lot of leaders do, particularly when you're not deployed overseas, when you're back at your base or what we call in garrison. You got leaders that I used to call them technicians instead of leaders. And these are the guys that are overly focused on the administrative tasks that a warfighting organization needs to do, but it's out of necessity. It's, the mandatory training, the cleaning up the area. We used to refer to it as painting rocks, which is a little bit of an exaggeration, but taking rocks and painting them to make sure the rocks on the ground look good. Focusing on that kind of thing, micromanage. You can do that in that environment. And I was lucky to only work for maybe 1 or 2 of those guys. One really stands out, but not too many. So pretty lucky there. But when you get into a combat environment, and when I say combat environment for you, that is like the core essence of what your business or your company is built to do. Like if you're running an automotive garage or repair facility or something like that, your main task is to fix vehicles. In the Marine Corps, your main task, even though you're not in combat all the time, small percentage of the time of your total time, but you're designed to fight and win in combat. So in combat, micromanagement just doesn't work. You have to rely on everybody to do their part in the fight. You have non-commissioned officers or NCOs, think of college age young men and women that are on the front lines. They're seeing situations unfold right in front of them. They're in charge of a few Marines themselves, and they have split second to make a life or death decision. You're not going to manage that decision. So in the Marine Corps, what you do is it's called training like you're going to fight, or train like you fight. And for you, it would be lead your organization in a way that supports the core mission of your organization. To use that automotive example, you want to live and breathe everything automotive repair. So other things kind of take a back seat. You have to do them, but what people need to hear from you as a leader is this is what we're doing. And then again, micromanaging is when you get a little bit too much into how people do things. So leave as many of the details as you can to the people doing the executing. Guide them, yes, but let them be in charge of a lot of those details. The psychology here: fear of failure, perfectionism, which is really how you feel about yourself, the inability to make a mistake. Maybe something has happened in the past, big embarrassment, fear. And in the Marines, it was life or death. Somebody could die if you micromanage or tried to. In your world, it's going to slowly erode the morale of your organization, and you're going to lose your best people. You want to look good. You want to look cooperative. You want to keep your job. But the thing about people pleasers is they underestimate the leaders that they think they're pleasing. Like a savvy executive is going to look at a mid-level manager and say they'll have an idea of how much you and your team can get accomplished. So when you come in and you overcommit, you really are just showing them that you're kind of a yes man, yes woman. An example might be you have a potential customer that's asking for something that you're really not sure that you can follow through on. You agree to something, and then the execution team just has a hell of a time following through on the commitments that you made. And you may say, well, that's kind of what I have to do. I have to bring the business in. I'm a sales guy. But the reality is, if it's not achievable or if it's so aggressive that it's really impractical, you start missing deadlines, the quality suffers. People doing the work actually start feeling bad about the job that they're doing, and then the whole thing starts to unravel. So, always best to be a straight shooter, and instead of just overcommitting, have an objective view of what you think is possible. Be optimistic. You can even lean in, be kind of aggressive with it, but you want to be realistic. You want to talk in facts. And if you're told to execute, then that's one thing. But if you're the one that's bringing up this idea of overcommitting everybody, it's going to reflect bad on you, especially if you're in a leadership position. Number 6, not delegating with intent. This is not really the same as micromanaging. It's different than micromanaging. It sounds a lot like it. But this is when we tell ourselves, well, it's just faster if I do it. Or something like, they're new. They're not ready for that. Nope. That's your ego talking. What you're really saying, because what you really believe is nobody can do this as well as I can. No, 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 that's not what I'm saying. Well, then let the other people do it. For whatever reason, you feel the need to show people you're competent and you can do it, even though you may have done it a 50 million times already. And you're also denying others the opportunity to grow. So you're really kind of holding people back. And in the end, less is getting done. What's the psychology here? Your identity is wrapped around the idea of doing it right. And what you need to consider when you're a leader is, yeah, you want to get things done right, but you also have the obligation to develop people and bring the team together so that in the end, more can get done, exponentially more. Number 7, avoiding vulnerability. It's pretty common, I think, that the more senior you get, the less vulnerability, the tougher you need to come off. You think that by being stoic or straight-faced or not showing emotion that people won't judge you as much, that you're coming off as stronger. So you keep things really tight and you come off as impersonal, uncaring. The way to think of it is people will derive their own opinion of why you're doing that. And it's probably not accurate to why you're doing it. But you got to realize that people don't follow titles, they follow other people. They may do what you need them to do because you have a title, but that's not why they follow voluntarily. And the more you wall yourself off from people emotionally, the more distance you're going to create between you and them. And one practical way to think about this, and I say this all the time, is when people don't feel connected to you or they don't trust you, they don't tell you things. So if you insist on being this little island or fortress in the middle of the battlefield of corporate life, you are reliant still on people bringing you information, and maybe they are, like in presentations or meetings that you have, but everybody has control of the amount and quality of the information that they're conveying. And if they don't trust you, it's not gonna be very high. But you do have to show people that the things that are going on are affecting you, and you're around people that are getting killed or wounded, or people that have lost their friends. It's okay. In fact, you have to show the guys that is affecting you too. You see these war movies with these iron personalities, and I'm afraid that some of those movies I think have affected guys that I used to work with. Not a lot, but some people take the need, or they form their identity based on these false images that are out there, when really the best image is just to be yourself. Because when you are yourself, then people they don't have to wonder if that's the real you that's showing up every day. One story here from Iraq, I was out one day visiting one of the companies, and we were in this kind of walled compound, kind of a big picture, like kind of maybe a 100 by 200 parking lot sized area with a wall around it and buildings. And we were in the middle of the city, and a couple shots got fired off in the neighborhood, not real close, maybe you couldn't really tell, but so I was walking around, I was talking to some of the Marines, and then there was a burst of fire that sounded really close, and it may or may not have been really close, but with the walls and the compound, it echoed and it kind of sounded like that. So when you're in that kind of situation, your feet just start moving, and there was a guard shack, or like a small hut in that compound, and the door was down. It was flat on the ground, and there's a couple guys that were out there with me. They were already inside, but my feet just started moving, and I ran for that doorway to get out of the open area. And I had my head down like this, and I didn't make it through the door. I smacked the side of the door, which was like this masonry construction, and I felt like my head and neck just got crushed into the top of my chest area, bounced back, moved over to the side, and then went in. And as I went into the room, I slipped on this door that was down on the ground, and my feet just kind of went up from under me, and I fell like basically flat on my ass in front of these two young guys. And I was on the ground. I looked up at both of them like this, and they were looking down at me. I was a major at the time, and these were two young guys, maybe lance corporals. And I looked up at them and I go, they're looking at me like I'm going to be mad at them. It's kind of a Marine thing. And I said, "Oh, would you see that one?" Like kind of making light of it on myself. And they're looking down at me and they just kind of like relaxed. And they said, "Oh, sir, that was nothing. We should have seen Sergeant so-and-so the other day. He was running down the street and he flew and flipped upside down. His rifle went flying across the street." So, in that way, if I, that was not the time for me to act like a tough guy in that situation. Best thing was to just admit that that was kind of a silly, stupid thing that just happened and kind of make fun of myself, which kind of relieved the whole situation. So vulnerability really brings the team together. And, I think too, especially with newer employees or younger employees, they want to hear about the things that did not go so well for you. It's fine to tell stories about things that did work out, but in reality, when you do that, it just kind of creates an expectation that they're going to need to be perfect, like you are saying you were, which, you probably weren't in the first place. Hopefully this video is a wake-up call for you. Maybe you needed to hear it, or somebody that needs to hear the message as well. And it's not about scaring people. It's about being aware that we all have these kind of negative qualities that are deep down in our subconscious. These are the kind of our core beliefs, and it's normal to have them. We're all human. But when you're a leader, it's not about you. It's about the group. And it's about doing things that benefit the group, make them successful, and thus make you successful as a leader. So here's my challenge for you is to start noticing these things. Go back over these 7 areas. Pay attention to situations that make you uncomfortable, that make you anxious. Think about why you feel that way. And when you're sitting there in the quiet and you're thinking about why you might be doing these things, ask yourself this one question: whose needs are being met, yours or your team's? That one question will change the way you lead.